Hi, this is a BSS's e-content video recording platform. My name is Piyush Pradhan and I'm from the BSS's College Department of English. Our topic of the day is roles of managers in business communication. We are going to, in fact, look at the process through which a business communication takes place between managers at the workplace and its employees. So let us just begin. What exactly is managerial communication at workplace? We're going to look at a specific function that involves managerial communication. This function is very helpful, especially for the managers, to communicate in a very smooth transitions when it comes to employees of the office. We see that the communication is taking place with each other very efficiently, and that becomes the basis for the true success of the organization. Let's understand this managerial communication based on three different features. First, we're going to look at the transfer of information. How much is the information so direct and taken with great ease and comfort of others? That is a very challenging criteria or an element to understand the communication process. So we see that in a workplace, whether some communication is taking place as one-to-one conversation or one-to-many or group, in next to no time. Second, we see that there is a smooth flow of concerned information among managers because in an office parlance, all are there to achieve common goal, and this is what needs to be done in one stipulated time period. In the third bullet point, we are going to look at the very intention of both managers and the other employees of the office, that what is the intention of this communication, and always remember it should work as a positive communication. Now, we're going to look at two different types of managerial communication. First is indeed interpersonal communication. If we understand it in a nutshell, it describes as something that generally takes place between two or more individuals within an organization. Second is the organizational communication. In this type of communication, things takes place in literally all the levels of the organization. Hope I brought this clarity through the second slide of my topic. We are now looking at this diagram of the flow of information process that is taking place between the employees and the managers from low to high or high to low. For that, I've divided it into two different elements, that is downward and upward. And we have to say that we are dealing with the organizational hierarchy. So let's begin firstly with the downward communication. On the right hand side of the screen, you can see that the arrow is made downward. That says that some communication is going from the top level to the middle level and going to its lower levels until it reaches to the other lower departments or the hierarchy of the organization. That is the downward communication. And on the left-hand corner, as you can see in the upward communication, absolutely the reverse or the opposite takes place with the communication process. In this, from the very lower hierarchy up till the level of the upward communication, taking place between board of directors, chief operating officers, etc., is taken in hand. I hope my audiences are aware through this particular part of the slide and the clarity of the diagram. Now, In this third slide, we're going to look at the varieties of directions through which information and further other sort of communication process actually flows smoothly and with great comfort. As you can see through some pictures, I could have provided you with different forms of communication process. Let's say the all channels type, or a chain type, or a wheel type, or some other kind of channels of communication. But I wanted to just focus on upward and downward communication. What we have just learned before in the previous slide through that diagram, this is what is mentioned now in a very detailed or brief form. In upward communication, as I told you a short while ago, a flow of information within an office from employees to its managers is coined as in the upward type of communication. That let the views to be shared hygienically based on the nature of the work that is and the specific task assigned by the managers or to the managers by its boss, and further going on to the employees of the workplace. In the downward communication, we look at the criteria in which the information flows all the way from managers to the office subordinates. And under its preview, we have managers often presenting orders and directions to the subordinates as to what to do and how to do about that task, which is given in that time frame. So employees have to keep a check and everything should be in order. It shouldn't be completely hassle-free. There should not be any miscommunication in the communication process. Pushing along to the next slide, we are going to deal with the specific time frame. Now, time frame is directly linked to time management and the stress of the employees. Why managerial communication is so important when it comes to its time frame? Let's work on these bulleted points. First is that the essentiality of the communication is to exchange ideas and to maintain mutual consent among employees and managers of the organization. Second, whatever sort of discussions are taking place, they should be, as I told you, hygienic and healthy by nature, so that it could be helpful in generating quick results. Now, in the third bullet, we have got individuals who are benefited through working for a longer period of time in an organization as a whole. We see that it's not the person which is more imperative, but it should be the organization which is overall very mandatory and imperative in order to earn long-run benefits. Otherwise, there is always a confusion and chaos that exist in various kind of organizations or workplaces all around the world. Now, in the other bullet points, you can read it based on how there are different scenarios being built by the amount of or the multitude of the work assigned to the managers by their boss, or the managers actually trying to give work to its lower employees at the workplace. So we need to learn to ensure that there should be an appropriate delegation of work. If you are selecting an individual for a specific work, that individual is demanded to be existing with the best he has and not fail the manager or further the other upper level management individuals. There should be a rightful skill that should be presented at the rightful time, and it should also ensure that the work that is delegated should complete in a proper time frame. Now, time frame also help in major reduction of duplicity of work. When there is too much of duplicity seen by managers, it is going to take a toll on its lower employees or other subordinates. So we have to see that such duplicity of the work needs to be curbed immediately, because you are that individual who is responsible for the work assigned by your superiors, and you have to live up to the expectations of those higher superior individuals, because you need to understand the modern and the latest developments which are taking place time and again. And so you have to keep the pace with the work order. This is what the employees need to understand. And lastly, of course, how managers or employees actually share grievances. All of us have got grievances, no doubt about it. But does that grievance, if not tackled in that stipulated time, is actually taking a shape of an absurdity? My goodness, this is going to be completely chaotic and full of panicking situation in entire workplace, and it's an organization that is affected a lot. So for the day-to-day complications, problems or issues, it should be the managers and the employees' beautiful chemistry which should help and support to resolve any such kind of contingency which appears. So in the form of any sort of efficient queries taking place, or any kind of other different or diverse channel that someone wants to have in the communication process. So it should be shared in both verbal as well as non-verbal communication ways. So manager should see and ensure that it is he who must make a positive environment for its subordinates, so that there can be a mutual harmony and respect. Now, having done with this part of the slide, we are now going to look at the existence of some office crises. We're going to look at the manager's role as a pivotal role where he's going to salvage the existing office crisis. How on earth does he do it? Let's see through this particular paragraph. During some critical office conditions, it is a manager that traces out different sort of solutions for its employees, irrespective of which department that employee belongs from. And so it never affects the immediate hierarchy of that organization, because that manager provides common platform to each individual based on that efficaciously working in that particular department. And so he has to ensure that everything is communicated efficaciously in order to achieve common ground, in order to not only support but also help each other, trying out the kind of help in tough times. In the second bullet, we are looking at effective communication that acts as a lifeline during any kind of office exigencies. Now, in this part of the slide, we are working on the barriers to effective managerial communication at the workplace. Now, again, there can be multitude of barriers, but I have chosen a bit of few and very common barriers. The first part of the major barrier, as we all are looking, is the use of massive politics going on among men and women, and there is too much of partiality that is seen when it comes to hierarchical attendance of the departments. Then sometimes it is seen that office staff is ignored, especially the office staff's likings and dislikings are ignored, and that is ignored because the manager to whom they are supposed to trust no longer exists with the best character and behavior that they demand for. Rather, they want to complain about their managers to their respected bosses. It's because sometimes there is discrepancy of the existence of skills and talents. Sometimes an office employee believes he is decently skillful, but its manager is not so much skillful or talented, and so that creates a great divide. And no one at further time in the future be able to rift that gap or cement that gap efficiently. So we have to check that the office employees need not to be brutally ignored by the organization. It should be the manager's duty to look at that communication process, how it is taking place, because lower staff or the employees able to sense the negativity that takes place in a form of, as I said, politics and partiality. Then comes, of course, the disturbing element that is called as the rumor. When the rumors are spread, they are the biggest and very nasty barrier to effective managerial communication. And lastly, we have got a barrier in a form of choice of words. Now, when I say choice of words, it's about clarification and the way how words need to be properly accented, that means enunciated, and of course how that content is heard efficiently by the good ears of the lower employees of the office. You cannot just keep shutting a blind eye or turning a deaf ear to what your manager wants to say, because after all, you have to learn to respect him because he is your superior, and you have to listen to what your manager says. Even if something is miscommunicated, you must immediately try to confirm where some things are missing, and you can ask for the clarity always. And that is the supreme duty of the managers of the office. So we have to see that in order to understand the barriers taking place in an organization, one needs to have a noise-free zone. If we have a special noise-free zone, it becomes a perfect medium to handle communication process among managers and employees. I hope so far through these number of slides, until this time, my audiences have understood the clear definition of how the business communication process takes place. Now, in this next slide, we are looking at a term called sufficient room for employees. Now, I've got nothing to do with the amount of people gathered at one place or the size of the work desks that can house many people in group. No, in fact, I'm not. Rather, I am dealing with the manual presence of managers who are ready to provide sufficient room for employees to open up their hearts, to try to share even certain things which can be non-official sometimes. So, we are going to look at another two negative aspects of this. First is, of course, a manager holding up the communication process at the time of lunch hour. Now, please, as a manager, do not address anyone during lunch hour. Lunch hour is that time where employees tend to dilute the real meaning of any talk or anything that is communicated by you as a manager. That is a time for someone to relax and consume a meal, and that time no one should be disturbed. So places like canteen or any kind of special lunch rooms must not be targeted by the managers. And in the second criteria, we are looking at the non-preference of verbal interactions by the manager. Under this context, we're looking at the employees' tendency. Employees have tendency to forget the sad things said by the manager to them, and this actually should rather be promoted in a virtual mode more. For instance, to use emails, to use WhatsApps and Facebooks or other kind of social media platforms. This helps again to enhance the efficacy of the communication process, and it let the other employees information alert all the time. Finally, we have reached to the various tips which I have come up for my audiences. These tips are going to be very operative for our managerial communication at workplace. Tip number 1, speak to your colleagues quite often as you can, and do not be confined to your cubicle if you are the manager. there should be a very healthy give and take and a kind of a friendly approach between a manager and its employee for the communication. There tend to exist a normalcy when any discussion should sometimes take place, and such kind of normalcy must be seen at the time of the routine work schedules only for the employees. Then comes tip number 2. Please try to promote morning hours discussions, because that is a time when your brain is very fresh. And please try to avoid late hour discussions. Of course, I'm not saying that we should avoid the statutory meetings or any kind of other emergency meetings, but there should always be a specific hour when any sort of discussion should be called. And based on that, we have to see whether the employees called by the boss or by the managers are actually exhausted or not. So we have to look at this health issue at the same time, because employees work hard and that's a tedious work of the day, and they become so much tired at their workstations that they do not have any much energy left to grasp whatever is being suitably used by the superiors of the office. So try to decently heed the words so that they can carefully take it. Tip number 3, how a manager is supposed to augment, especially the listening skill, as a talent of its employee. We're going to see that augmentation of the listening skills should be succeeded to its fullest. Because when you are working in a workplace, every other employee is your colleague. And if you as a manager act like a chatterbox in front of your subordinates, then you can never act like a genuine interpreter of the business talk. Because at that time, there will be a loose talk, and that will be unappreciating sometimes. Lastly, we are going to conclude with tip number 4. Do not always work with the habit of being an isolated manager. Mind that you have to always look at the well-being of your other employees. So don't try to work in order to be so much sociable in any context. Try to gain your access and develop sufficient momentum so that you can work with others as team rather than targeting someone individually within the organization. Thanks ever so much, my beloved audience. I'm forever indebted to each one of you. I couldn't have done so very much without you. Goodbye to you and Godspeed.